The winter of 1964 in New York City was not merely a season of snow and ice. It was a season of hunting. The wind whipping around the corner of 125th Street carried the scent of betrayal, sharp and metallic, like the taste of a penny placed under the tongue. Harlem was a kingdom divided, a chessboard where the pieces were rapidly changing colors. On one side stood the Nation of Islam, a disciplined phalanx of bow-tied zealots loyal to Elijah Muhammad, burning with the fury of a spurned lover. On the other stood one man, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, formerly known as Malcolm X. He was the Black Prince who had dared to speak truth to power, exposing the rot within the organization that had raised him. He was alone, marked for death, a prophet walking through a valley of wolves without a staff. The police despised him. The FBI tapped his phone. The media painted him as a hate-monger. But in the shadows of the underworld, where the law of the jungle superseded the Constitution, Malcolm had one friend left. A friend who didn't pray, didn't march, and didn't turn the other cheek. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat in the back of the Flash Inn on a freezing Tuesday night in December. The restaurant was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of roasted chicken and cigarette smoke. Bumpy was not eating. He was watching the door. When Malcolm X walked in, the hush that fell over the room was absolute. It wasn't the silence of fear that usually accompanied Bumpy. It was the silence of reverence. Malcolm looked tired. His tall frame was gaunt, his eyes rimmed with the red fatigue of a man who hasn't slept in weeks. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, a weight that was slowly crushing his spirit. He sat opposite Bumpy, placing his briefcase on the floor. It was a tableau of contradictions, the sinner and the saint, the gangster and the preacher, the switchblade and the Quran. They were the two kings of Harlem, ruling over different domains but breathing the same air. "They're closing in, Red," Bumpy said, using the nickname from Malcolm's wilder youth, a time when they were both hustlers on these very streets. Bumpy's voice was low, a rumble of gravel and certainty. "I hear the whispers. The fruit of Islam. They aren't selling bean pies anymore. They're buying ammunition. They're casing your house in Queens. They know your schedule better than you do." Malcolm nodded slowly, sipping his water. "I am in the hands of Allah, Bumpy. If it is my time to go, then no man can stop it. And if it is not my time, then no army can take me." Bumpy leaned forward, the expensive fabric of his suit straining across his broad shoulders. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, held a flicker of desperate affection. "Allah is busy, Malcolm. And the FBI? They want you dead just as much as Elijah does. You are walking naked into a fire. Let me help you. I have 50 men, hard men, men who don't dream, men who don't hesitate. I can put a ring of steel around you so tight that not even a fly could land on your jacket without my permission. Give me the word." It was a generous offer. In the currency of the streets, it was a blank check. Bumpy Johnson was offering his private army, the Cheetahs, to protect a man who had publicly denounced crime and vice. It was the ultimate paradox. The devil offering his trident to defend the angel. But Malcolm smiled, a sad, weary smile that broke Bumpy's heart. "I cannot, Bumpy," Malcolm said softly. "I cannot preach freedom while living in a cage of fear. I cannot tell my people to stand up for themselves if I am hiding behind your guns. The movement, it has to be pure. If I survive by the sword, I validate everything they say about me. I must walk this path alone." Bumpy slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "This isn't philosophy, Malcolm. This is physics. A bullet travels at 2,000 feet per second. Faith travels at the speed of a prayer. The bullet gets there first, always. But Malcolm remained unmoved. He reached across the table and placed his hand over Bumpy's clenched fist. I know you love me, brother. And I love you. But you cannot save a man who has already accepted his fate. Do not put your men in harm's way for me. Promise me. Bumpy didn't promise. He couldn't. He was a strategist, a man who believed in control. To let Malcolm walk out unprotected was to accept chaos. So, Bumpy Johnson lied. He nodded, withdrew his hand, and said, Have it your way, Red. But the moment Malcolm left the restaurant, disappearing into the swirling snow, Bumpy snapped his fingers. A lieutenant named Junie materialized from the shadows. He says no, Bumpy whispered, his jaw tight. But he doesn't get a vote. Cover him. I want 3 cars on him at all times. I want men on the rooftops across from his house. I want eyes in the Audubon. If anyone looks at him wrong, you break them. And Junie, don't let him see you. He wants to be a martyr. I want him to be a survivor. For 2 months, the invisible shield of Bumpy Johnson held firm. It was a masterpiece of clandestine operation. Malcolm X moved through New York believing he was protected only by God, unaware that he was being shadowed by the most dangerous men in the city. When a suspicious car idled too long outside Malcolm's home in East Elmhurst, it was found the next morning stripped and crushed in a junkyard in the Bronx, its occupants beaten and put on a bus to Chicago. When a known Nation of Islam enforcer tried to enter a rally in Harlem with a bulge under his coat, he was intercepted in the alleyway by Bumpy's men, disarmed, and left with 2 broken kneecaps and a message. Not in Bumpy's house. It was a phantom war. Bumpy was spending thousands of dollars a week, bribing cops to stay away, paying off informants, keeping his army fed and alert. He was fighting the entire world to keep one man alive. And for a while, it worked. The assassins were frustrated. The FBI was confused. Malcolm seemed untouchable. But secrets in Harlem are like smoke. They eventually find the cracks. In mid-February 1965, just days after his house was firebombed, a miraculous escape where Bumpy's lookouts had actually spotted the Molotov cocktails seconds before they were thrown, screaming to wake the family, Malcolm discovered the truth. He saw a familiar face in the crowd at a speaking engagement, a man he knew worked for Bumpy. He realized that his survival wasn't a miracle. It was a racket. The confrontation that followed was not in a restaurant, but on the street, right on the corner of 116th and Lenox. It was February 18th, 3 days before the end. The wind was howling like a banshee. Malcolm stopped Bumpy's car, forcing the Cadillac to the curb. He banged on the window until Bumpy rolled it down. "Call them off!" Malcolm shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "I saw them, Bumpy. I saw your men at the firebombing. You are making me a liar. I tell the world I am unafraid while you treat me like a child." Bumpy stepped out of the car. The 2 men stood nose to nose in the freezing cold, their breath mingling in white clouds. "They tried to burn your babies alive, Malcolm," Bumpy roared, losing his composure for the first time in years. "If my men weren't there to yell, you and Betty and the girls would be ash right now. Is that the purity you want? Dead daughters?" Malcolm grabbed Bumpy by the lapels of his cashmere coat. He was crying now, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Yes, if that is the price. I cannot be beholden to you, Bumpy. I cannot build a nation on the foundation of a crime lord's protection. You are my friend, but you are not my savior. If you love me, if you truly respect me, you will call them off, all of them. Give me my dignity, Bumpy. Let me stand on my own 2 feet. Bumpy looked into Malcolm's eyes. He saw the fire of the fanatic, the resolve of the saint, and the stubbornness of the brother he had known for 20 years. He realized then that saving Malcolm's life would mean destroying his soul. To protect him was to dishonor him. It was the hardest decision of Bumpy Johnson's life. Harder than ordering a hit. Harder than doing time in Alcatraz. He had to let his friend die. "You're a stubborn fool, Red," Bumpy whispered, his voice trembling. "And you are a good friend, Bumpy," Malcolm replied, embracing the older man. "The best friend a man could ask for. But this is my walk." Bumpy nodded. He signaled to his driver. He signaled to the shadow detail watching from the corner. He made a cutting motion across his throat. "Stand down." The order went out over the grapevine. The shield was lowered. The Cheetash were recalled to their dens. The angel was left alone in the valley. February 21, 1965. The Audubon Ballroom. Bumpy Johnson sat in his apartment staring at the telephone. He knew the schedule. He knew the rally started at 2 p.m. He knew the police detail had been strangely reduced to almost nothing, a clear sign that the powers that be had cleared the stage. He sat there, a glass of scotch in his hand, waiting for the ring. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need to. He could feel the disturbance in the air, a sudden drop in the atmospheric pressure of Harlem. At 3:10 p.m. the phone rang. It was Junie. "Boss," Junie said, his voice choking. "They got him. Shotgun, handguns. It was a slaughter, boss. He's gone." Bumpy didn't say a word. He gently placed the receiver back on the cradle. He looked at the scotch, then threw the glass against the wall, shattering it into 1,000 amber shards. He didn't weep. He didn't scream. He went to the window and looked out at the gray skyline of Harlem. The city looked different now. It looked smaller, darker. The light had gone out. What happened next is the stuff of urban legend, whispered about by old men in barber shops to this day. The history books will tell you that the police arrested 3 members of the Nation of Islam, Talmadge Hayer, Norman 3X Butler, and Thomas 15X Johnson. But the streets tell a different story. They tell of the week of silence. For 5 days after the assassination, Harlem was a ghost town. But in the shadows, a reaper was moving. Bumpy Johnson, the man who had promised to stand down, now stood up with a vengeance that terrified even his own crew. He felt the crushing guilt of the survivor. He felt the blood on his hands because he had listened to Malcolm. He had respected the wish, and the wish had killed the man. They say Bumpy made a list, not of the foot soldiers who pulled the trigger, they were just pawns, but of the shot callers, the men who had whispered in the ears of the shooters, the captains of the local mosques who had branded Malcolm a traitor. On the night of February 23rd, a mosque in Harlem was firebombed. No one claimed responsibility. On February 24th, a high-ranking lieutenant of the Nation of Islam was found floating in the East River. No witnesses. On February 25th, Bumpy walked into a bar where known NOI sympathizers gathered. He walked to the center of the room, placed a single shotgun shell on the bar counter, and looked around. "The next man who speaks ill of Malcolm," Bumpy announced, his voice dead and hollow, "will not live to see the sunrise. The war is over. You won. You killed the prince. But if you touch his family, if you touch his memory, I will burn this entire city to the ground, with all of you inside it." He walked out, and nobody moved, nobody breathed. The honor among thieves had trumped the religious fervor. The gangsters of Harlem, the hustlers, the pimps, and the thieves, they all donned black armbands. They didn't understand Malcolm's theology. They didn't care about Pan-Africanism, but they understood loyalty. They understood that Bumpy loved him, and that was enough. Years later, close to his own death in 1968, Bumpy was asked by a young reporter about his greatest regret. The reporter expected him to talk about a botched deal or a prison sentence. Bumpy looked at the young man, his eyes misty with the cataracts of age and memory. "My greatest regret," Bumpy said, leaning back in his chair, "is that I was a gentleman. A friend asked me to step aside and I did. I respected his principles more than his life. If I had been a worse man, if I had been a tyrant who ignored his wishes, Malcolm would be alive today. He'd hate me for it, he'd curse my name, but he'd be alive to do it. Sometimes, kid, loyalty is a curse. It makes you hold the door open for the Grim Reaper." This story of Bumpy and Malcolm is a testament to the strange magnetic pull of Harlem in the 1960s. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who was the moral man? The religious leaders who ordered a murder, or the criminal who offered his life to prevent it? In the end, the good people of society turned their backs on Malcolm X. The government watched him die. The media mocked him. Only the bad man, the villain of the story, offered him a hand. It reminds us that character isn't defined by your profession or your rap sheet. It's defined by who stands next to you in the rain when everyone else has run for shelter. Bumpy Johnson was a killer, yes, but for a brief, shining moment in the winter of 1965, he was the only true friend the greatest revolutionary of our time ever had. This tragic bond leaves us with a lingering thought. How different would history have been if Bumpy had ignored Malcolm's plea? If the cheetahs had been in the Audubon ballroom that day, would we still have Malcolm today? Or was his martyrdom inevitable, a destiny written in the stars that no gangster could rewrite? What are your thoughts on this forbidden friendship? Does Bumpy's loyalty redeem his criminal past, or is he just a violent man who happened to love a hero? Drop a comment below and let's debate the gray areas of history.